Welcome to Theorycraft, a live podcast where game developers and their players engage in conversation. Here we are at the end of May. It's been another 2 weeks. It's good to see you two again. We'll be joined by Candace shortly, I think. There's a new game on at least some of y'all's radars. Chris, what have you been up to since the last time we caught up here?
Just really working. And there's going to be some kind of announcement that we're going to make next month.
Really?
So kind of getting ready for that. So that's going to be exciting.
Pre-pogging over here.
Yeah. So I've been stressing about this, sort of putting this all together for like the last couple months, and that's kind of really almost done. And so we'll see how that goes. But so excited for that. And what else am I doing? I don't know. I think that's basically it.
Any hot summer wardrobe refreshes? You getting ready?
It's always air conditioned where I am.
Yeah. I mean, you basically just always wear Kevin knows, you basically wear shorts year round over here. So you don't really change your wardrobe too much, but it was actually interesting. I mean, the weather's been kind of changing. It was raining last weekend, so it was nice because we are going to go into a drought over here in California. So
great. The yearly drought. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, they're trying to tell people, no watering your grass after you're allowed, I think, an hour per week or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, they want to reduce water usage by 40%. I'm like, good luck with that. And then I looked at the data, and they're like, they wanted to reduce it by 40%, but then it was up 1% from last month. So good luck.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of y'all without lawns to water get like a tax credit, right? That's how it works?
Oh, yeah. I mean, what's interesting is, with these droughts is just that they're always like, turn the water off while you're brushing your teeth or whatever. It's so critical. But if you look at the data, it's like 95% commercial watering of lawns is where all the water goes, right? It's not like the random person in their house.
Right. It's like the climate change discussion writ small. Yeah, it's just a microcosm of that. Probably it's all fucking Nestle and like big almonds draining the aquifers dry, but of course it's on you. So
and you walk through the spectrum in Irvine, and like every lawn's being watered.
Those dumbass fountains on
during lunchtime.
Well, in Orange County now, they basically they build a lot of houses and condos and stuff without lawns now. It's like all
good.
It's sort of like which I think is fine, and it's just sort of
in there.
It's dirt and cactuses, which I think is fine. Like that's what grows here. So, anyways, yep.
Irvine is flat out unnatural with the amount of vegetation they've imported. It's so weird walking around and seeing trees that like have no business being in California being propped up. But that's what we do. Kevin, how are you?
Doing good. End of the school year for my girls.
Oh, nice.
So had a prom and a graduation coming up. It's been nice.
Prom, holy crap.
I know.
Kids were like toddlers.
Exactly.
So that's Friday.
Cool.
But they're all grown up.
That's very exciting.
So, I've been doing that, and in spare time, I've been playing V Rising. A couple other little games, but
yeah, we'll be talking about that. Any empty nest syndrome feels starting to come up here, or?
Oh, they're not ready for that yet. So
they're not ready for that. Okay.
Yeah, no one's leaving. The graduating one isn't like zooming off to college just yet. Okay. It'll be local community college.
Cool.
Or maybe a gap year.
That's the move. That's what I did. So
same here.
Yeah, and you turned out all right. That's cool. And you're enjoying the air conditioning, obviously. I brought my air conditioner out this week in anticipation of this year's unprecedented heat event. We don't know when it'll be. Last year we had a heat dome. We got to like 40 degrees Celsius, which is really fucking hot in Fahrenheit, not Vancouver temps. We'll see how that goes. So, speaking of projects, ones that did get announced, Second Dinner unveiled Marvel Snap this week. We now know what Ben Brode and co have been working on, and it is a really flashy, super accelerated CCG, deck builder Marvel sort of game. Did both of you two watch the trailer? Any thoughts on that guy?
I thought the trailer, the gameplay footage, the studio footage was good. I thought that was really well produced. You could tell Marvel and different kind of operators there and partners kind of really foot the bill for it. It was good. I think the game looks really cool. I've talked with some friends who I really trust who are playing it and who don't work at Second Dinner, and they're impressed, and I think it's good. So at least the gameplay of it, we'll see. How robust the monetization model will be, and how successful, or if it will get a lot of engagement. I think the Marvel property probably 5 years ago, like when Second Dinner started, I think was more coveted, but today there's so many Marvel games now that it's like the not quite Warhammer-ish, but there's a
Mhm.
lot of Marvel games, right? And so it's a little crowded, I think, or noisy with that property. But I think the cards look really rad. I got like all these 90s vibes from like, I used to collect Marvel cards back when I was a kid, and a lot of them invoke those same kind of feelings, like the art of them. It was definitely
Yeah.
nostalgic. So,
Yeah.
and then I think the gameplay of the game is just about really quick matches. So it's like twice as fast as Hearthstone, at least. I mean, it's pretty quick, right?
Kind of
So,
frighteningly quick. Like, I don't know if I've really gotten into many games that promise to have such a short session length. I don't really know how I feel about it. Like, I'm wondering if I would like it or not, and if I do really
yeah.
enjoy it, what does that say for like my attention span? Or it's probably just done naturally to really fit the platform, I guess. Yeah, I thought
TikTok gaming, yeah.
TikTok gaming, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I thought that was one of the more interesting parts of the reveal to me, talking about how they had the simultaneous gameplay loop and how just crazy sped up it felt. Almost as sped up as Ben Brode's incredible adrenal performance throughout that entire fucking video. Like, God, what an asset. That dude just seems like a font of fucking positivity and dev energy. He really killed it. It's so interesting to watch that on the heels of what the ArcLight Rumble trailer just a couple weeks ago, which we talked about. I feel like this one kind of was received pretty uncontroversially. It feels pretty straightforward, sort of without cringe, without a lot of controversy. Just kind of looks good. Might be a solid game.
I think the only little slight fumble they had was, I noticed when they announced the teaser trailer, it looked like it was like an action game. And so I noticed a lot of like, wow, it looks really cool. Like they thought that was the game, but it was just really a cinematic for the game, right? And so I think some people felt rugged when they saw that was a card game.
Rugged.
But
oh my God.
but
they
I think
were
it's just
bullish on it, and then they were bearish.
yeah, but it's like a small thing. No one will ever remember that, but that's the only like little thing. But,
I actually didn't really watch the video. Like, I saw that what they were making generally, but didn't look much further than that. I guess I just feel cynical about the first announcements. I feel like they're so frequently misleading, and there's not enough for me to really dive into with interest. So,
you
like,
mean of
it's something I'll
games or
watch,
from first
just in
announcements from
games in
studios?
general.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. No, first announcements. So
yeah.
Like, I like to see things once they're further along, or like in a stage where I can actually put my hands on it. Because it's so easy to spin a different thing, showcase like the 2% awesome, sort of thing.
Sure.
Not realizing that the 98%. So I've gotten cynical in my old age.
Yeah, but between that and ArcLight, I mean, if we ever all go back to commuting, I suppose we'll have something to do. I just feel like for me, I don't know, I have a fairly active commute. Chris, I know you drive. Kevin, I don't think you're commuting at all. So we're not in the audience necessarily, but I try to think of like, when would I squeeze in time for this? And it's like maybe while I'm at home on the couch, like while something else is also going on. But like, I don't know, I'm becoming allergic to that kind of like dual language stream coming into my brain sort of activity lately. It just feels like, why am I actively trying to make it so I am learning nothing from everything I'm doing at the same time,
Yeah.
So,
Nice Talk reminds us that Diablo Immortal's in 8 days. Wow. I didn't think it.
Shit.
I didn't know. I didn't know it was that coming up that quick. Crazy. Okay.
That's pretty hype. Have there been any videos like akin to the ArcLight Rumble announce about DI? I haven't really been keeping eyes on that. That seems so soon, and I don't.
They
feel
had
like
one. I think. I mean, they had Wyatt was talking about it a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember, but yeah.
Google Play ads.
Yeah.
Whatever those are, I'm outing myself.
Yeah, maybe they'll probably have a big push right the day of, probably, or something like that.
Yeah.
I guess. So we'll see.
Cool.
Yeah, they're probably pretty gun shy about advertising.
Yeah.
That one in certain circles.
Yeah.
Chris, you mentioned that Summer Game Fest is coming up in a couple weeks on Twitch.
Yeah. It's like the replacement for E3. So Jeff Keighley's going to host it. So I see a lot of hype about this, and I see a lot of like little teasers from studios that may be there. So that would be cool to see. Keighley is just all big on this Summer Game Fest thing. So we'll see how it goes. It'll be on Twitch, I think, June 9th, I think it will be. Oh, wow. And the Xbox Showcase, June 12th. Wow. It's going to be hot gaming summer right here.
Yeah, cool.
Hot
Okay,
gaming
so
summer.
I mean, looking at the names on it, yeah, this is basically the new E3, eh? We're going to get some juicy announces in here. It's interesting that, like, all of these companies on here, there's still some really sizable games I'm seeing, like 2K, EA, Netflix is on there, Riot, Sega, PlayStation. Like, I'm surprised more of these companies haven't paired off and, like, just done their own Nintendo Direct style thing, which I feel like was the trend as E3 started to kind of... But maybe the umbrella of the Keighleys is, like, powerful enough to bring everybody back. I'm thinking it probably is. This looks like another Layer Frame site, by the way. I'm going to have to ask.
I think didn't they ban Activision from the Game Awards last year or something like that? There's like, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. While they were still on the board or something. Yeah, anyways, Activision's on a tile on here, so I guess they've sufficiently
their
redeemed
timeout
themselves.
is over.
Yeah, their timeout is done.
You can come back to the table.
That's
now.
good. Yeah. In the court of Keighley, they have passed muster, so good to know. I guess we can talk about what everybody has been playing lately. And by everybody, I mean at least Kevin. V Rising has been popping off. I hear folks on my company Slack talking about it nonstop. You and Candace were bantering. What about this game has got you so drawn in?
So it's very similar to Valheim in its like progression feel and its approachability, but then it has like a alternate game mode almost, a PvP style, which is more Rust-like. So I think it's feeding two different communities with the same game pretty effectively. And yeah, it's just...
You're doing both within a session, though. It's not two different game modes. It's not like you play PvE and you have a Valheim experience, or you choose PvP and you have a Rust experience.
Well, you sort of select which server you're going to play your character on.
Okay.
So, and you can't switch servers, right? So, like in Valheim, you can move your character around. You know, like you can jump with your character from realm to realm.
Yeah.
But in this, it's tied to it. So it's a pretty big investment.
Rust-like, okay.
Yeah, so if you're either going to join a server that plays like Rust and has full PvP and get in there and try to carve out your little, territory.
Oh, I see. But you might join a hosted server where it's kind of Care Bear rules.
Yeah, and you just kind of play through and progress up and kill all the bosses and that kind of thing, explore all the zones. So, and that's the mode I've been doing. That's
the Valheim sort of experience, is the sprawl out across the world. There are unique event bosses to encounter and stuff like that.
Right. And Valheim there's just a feeling of massiveness to it, like the programmatically generated world. And I haven't seen like a lot of attempts to make that like an intimate Rust-style PvP experience for whatever reason. So, and I think part of it is because of how massive it is. But V Rising is not programmatically generated. They hand built the map, and it's not random. Okay. And so all the areas are like handcrafted, which make them feel better, look better, in a variety of cases play better. And then they've also made it super intimate. So like you're constantly colliding with others if you're playing like a full server. So whereas in Valheim, because it's so massive, you could just jump in a boat, sail off, and never see anyone ever again.
It's a 10-minute perilous boat ride away from the next place somebody might want to set up. Totally.
So in terms of feeding that gameplay experience, the more Rust-like gameplay experience, V Rising set it up in a better way.
What do you think are like a couple, like 3 or so takeaways of the game that you think are good? Things that you would take and you'd suggest for other games or something, or that are original or interesting, or something that is something novel.
Yeah, there's something that really stood out in this game is how powerful thematic is. Because they have this day-night cycle. And when it's daytime, you can run around, but it's very dangerous. It's much more dangerous than running around nighttime because the sun burns you. And so, the sunlight is like a third of the game, the day-night cycle. So basically they have this rule that on paper sounds atrocious to players. So 1/3 of the time you just can't run around and play as easily as you could normally. And I think most people would be like, oh, that's the worst. But with the thematic of, oh, well, you're a vampire, then everything becomes okay, right? Like, well, of course, this makes sense. Like it's sunlight. I'm a vampire. Of course, it's dangerous and I get burned and it's inconvenient and all that. So it really struck me how powerful that thematic is in selling the gameplay idea. Because like a soft thematic there would have gone over, terribly. Essentially,
It's a little bit more than thematic. Also, hi, I'm here. Sorry.
Welcome, Candace.
Hey.
Speaking of bloodsuckers, Candace.
Speaking of bloodsucking, here she is. No, it's a little bit more than thematic too, though, because the inverse would just be like if you were playing Valheim and suddenly it's nighttime and you're just dying all the time. I guess nighttime is cold, and so you kind of die. Like you can't do anything, but it's actually more nuanced than that. During the day, you can still go out and adventure if you haven't played V Rising yet. You can still adventure. You just have to stay in the shadows.
Right.
And they have this elaborate system of shadows, which you could use a UX pass. It's not perfect, but it's good. And so it's essentially like playing the game, except there's just the carpet is hot lava, right?
Yeah.
So you get to make that call as the player. Like, do I want to fight this boss in the daytime, knowing that this boss already has a lot of area denial, for example? And so like you could know that if I'm trying to fight this boss in the shade, then I'm not going to win because I'm eventually going to run out of shade, and that's super deadly. And it's not like you die instantly; you die pretty quick. But because life is such a finite resource as well, which I thought was really well done. Like it would be easy to just say, oh, you just heal whenever you eat monsters, because that's what the players would expect is like you suck blood and you get your health back. But they were like, no, you get it like in a reserve that is going to be slow dripped to you over time. And should you choose to tap into that resource and like expedite your healing, then you're going to lose that resource. It took me a really long time to learn about like the tier system of biting people too. I thought that was fucking great.
I mean, same TBH.
You guys,
I haven't played the game yet. I was going to play it this weekend just because it's been busy with some work stuff. But I think what's really interesting to me is hearing these stories that you guys are telling about like it seems like the fantasy of being a vampire is really a pillar for them in this game. And that's really cool to hear. Yeah.
Such a good gameplay mechanic.
Just to kind of clarify a little bit, what I was saying is like that. It's the kind of stuff like you illustrated all the gameplay changes, which between night and day, and all the sort of strategic considerations you make as a player, depending on what time it is and what your plans are for the day or the night or the blood moon. And I love all that stuff, and I've traditionally always loved all that stuff. But in the sense of like today's gamer, with the people carrying this flag of like, you can't do stuff like that anymore because we're not respecting the gamer's time and that kind of thing. We can't inconvenience players anymore. It was really interesting to see how not only can you, which I've always believed you can,
we know
with a solid thematic, it just makes that pill go down so much better, so much easier. Yeah, I'm still waiting for my royalties from them for the days, because they actually daze you frequently, and they actually write the word days. So
nice.
But just so that was one of the things that impressed me. It's just like a well thought out thematic. In this case, it's supernatural because everyone understands vampires and sunlight and that interaction. Well, unless you're into the Twilight series, then that things can be sold so much better, so much easier. So don't shirk on the thematics when you're designing.
I like how it sounds like really the fantasy's driven, not just like, say, insular with the character, but also the way they interact with the world. You're thinking about the time of day, you're thinking about these shadows and all of that. And that's really cool. Because that connection of just, it's not just the character, but it's also the world and all these other aspects is powerful, I think. Yeah.
And it also delivers on that thing that Valheim does so well is you get surprised by it, because like suddenly it's daytime and you weren't paying attention and you're like, oh shit.
Oh, right.
That changes everything, right? Like much like in Valheim where it's like it starts raining or there's something going on and you feel it. It's not just a cosmetic sort of environmental experience. It's actually a gameplay experience that adjusts how you have to play, and it just makes everything more meaningful and more emotional.
Yeah, even in Warcraft 3, I liked turning at night as a night elf, and it would replenish your moon
Right.
wells and
Yep.
that sort of thing. Or you could have Shadow Meld, or even in Dota with like Night Stalker, who his ultimate makes it night and he runs faster and he's scary at night. You're like, oh shit, it's night. Watch out for the Night Stalker. I think all of that kind of immersion of fantasy is you don't see a lot of that today, as much, right? Because I think a lot of these games are usually character based, where everybody has to fit the same mold, and so you can't do really creative stuff like that. It has to be balanced, right? And so
the players are always looking at the glass half empty portion of it. It's like, yeah, but then my life sucks when it's not night.
Yeah, exactly.
When they're not in their power form, they're like miserable theoretically.
Blizzard has this, and there's a game design value, which is like make it a bonus or whatever, and so try to like twist the kind of thing, like, oh shit, daytime is so lame, I hate daytime. How do they twist it to make it a bonus, you think, or do they not?
No, they don't really, and I think that it's kind of a fallacy. Like, you go from normal to better as opposed to from bad to good. Like, I think what matters is the emotional distance between those 2 points. And so it's easier to sell to people, I think, the basic idea that, we're treating you like normal. Like Rest XP is a great example of, like, normally you get 1x XP, but when you have Rest XP, you get double for a while. That's easy to sell on paper, but people still have an emotional good or bad feeling based on whether or not they have Rest XP or not. Like, they feel bad when they run out of Rest XP. So I don't know that the psychology is really paying out as well as, people running that philosophy are.
So what do you, this just seems like something that is so foundational, but so fucking difficult to nail. Like, WoW has to deal with this every single expansion in terms of how they pace, their itemization and their rewards, and how complete your class feels until you get your, your borrowed power, your legendaries or whatever, and trying to, I don't know, just like shift the entire window so that the experience is like, I feel good and now I feel better, as opposed to like, I felt bad and now I feel normal. Is there any one thing that sticks out about how V has kind of calibrated this so that like you feel okay and then sometimes you feel more powerful? Like, and during the sunlight, I mean, I don't totally understand it, but like, how sort of like diminished are your abilities? Or is it just that like it's more dangerous to be doing anything because there's only like limited shade?
Yeah, like, you just have to pay attention to your environment a lot more. The context.
But you're not like moving slowly. You don't feel crippled.
Yeah, you still fight at full power. And
okay.
As far as I know, like, they might be draining blood faster or something going on that I haven't noticed. But
yeah, the way that it works is just, for those who haven't played or don't know, it's if you are touching sunlight, then after a couple of warning seconds, you get like probably 5 seconds of warning, then you start taking 10% of your health per second or so in damage. And so you're playing this game of like going from shadow to shadow, which again is just such a strong fantasy of lurking in the shadows and feeling like you're striking from the shadows, and that you're laying in wait for your prey. The thematic is so strong, but then the mechanic is also just great because you can do stuff. It's just more of a pain in the ass, which actually is the same in Valheim. You could do stuff at night. It's just kind of a pain in the ass. And they do it by limiting your visibility, which always sucks. And like V is just like, no. We're just going to lean right into the thematics of it.
The monsters rush you at nighttime in Valheim too. Typically, it's like if you're out on your own, your base is going to get completely sacked. Because to me, it always felt like, don't they have attack patterns such that like the raids feel a little more heavy at night? Or maybe that was just always kind of my experience. So like you kind of wanted to be home to defend sometimes. Maybe that's just in the early game, or maybe I'm nuts.
Didn't happen to me. Maybe you were close to a spawning point or something.
I might.
They also
bad.
give you a little bit of power to compensate for some of those things, whether it's with good food or certain equipment, which always also feels really good. And they have some of that in V Rising as well. Like, they have sun resistance potions, for example, which increase the time that you can be out in the sun before you start taking damage.
Is there a persistent kind of PvE threat feeling to that to V as well? Like in Valheim, you couldn't just you had to fortify your base to a degree, and sometimes it was helpful to just have somebody there, or like, are you under waves that are coming in PvE wise, or is it more like a Warcraft 3 map where you're roaming out and creeping or something like that?
Yeah, they don't have it, and I feel like it's missing. I would like to see that element added at some point. Like, you have to defend your base from torch wielding mobs, that come during the day to stake you while you're in the coffin.
Get that if you're playing on a PvP server, but certainly
sure.
like it suffers from the same pitfalls as anything that has like a super limited PvP, super limited server cap. I mean, wherein I wanted to get on a PvP server so that I could get the full experience of the game. But then, like, I got onto a PvP server that was quite established, so everybody was very, progressed out, and we immediately got eliminated. And in those kind of games, it is just an elimination game. Once your stuff is taken, you can either start over or you can keep playing. And so they didn't really take any strides there, which is where I would have liked to see some innovation, because I think that's like the next step, like that, maybe that, and like some kind of matchmaking, or I don't know, it's just something to preserve that. It's the difference between playing Sea of Thieves PvE, which they don't have really, and then Sea of Thieves like PvP, where like everything that you're doing when you're playing Sea of Thieves is there's like a little bit of danger because you know that someone could invade you at any time. Whereas like if you didn't have that threat, then the gameplay itself is kind of fun, but it's like way less engaging.
Yeah.
And so I think that Valheim also didn't have that problem, right? Because it wasn't, you could turn on PvP with the totems or whatever, but I think like the next big stride in that genre is going to be really figuring out how to balance or matchmake or have like coalesce servers or something to preserve the feeling of like, one, it's still fair, but not too fair. You don't want everyone to always be on even footing, right? Or else there'll be no winners, right? And then you're not incentivized to win the game. But
by the way, I was going to say, open up the floor if people want to give their thoughts as well. Go ahead, Candace. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say the innovation that I actually really liked was how they innovated on the food system, because in Valheim, the food system is like you can craft better and better food, and the food gives you more energy, so that when you have more energy, you can chop more trees, you can withstand combat for longer. Like you feel a very visceral power gain with your food in Valheim, which is really nice. And there's like its own progression to it because it's part of the crafting system. And so as you're progressing, you're getting better food and yada yada. That feels really good. What V Rising did with food is you're a vampire. You're not going to eat food, right? So this is the biting system that I was talking about before, where you have the blood pool in the center of your screen, and your blood pool, the way it works is while you have any blood in your blood pool, you can still regenerate your health, but you're still regenerated at quite a slow rate, like maybe 1.5% of your health per second or something like that. It's pretty slow.
Yeah.
And then there's this ability you get called Blood Mend, which you can start to drain that pool to heal faster. So it probably takes about 20 seconds to heal your full health. And you're channeling it, which means that you're vulnerable. Like you can't just do it during combat. Sorry, you can do it during combat, but it's not wise. And they also put some additional constraints on it in combat as well, wherein if you blood mend during combat, you can only regenerate, I think, 25 or 50% of your max health. It doesn't let you heal all the way in combat, so it makes combat a little bit harder, which I thought was really smart. But so the way that food works is anything in the game that has blood is food. So skeletons aren't going to have food for you. So you know that skeletons are harder because you're not going to be able to feed unless you go find something to feed on. And again, you always want to keep your blood pool full. But then also any food, anybody that has blood can have like a rarity to their blood. And it's not just based on their difficulty. Like sometimes a level 1 bandit can have like a really like good bloodline, I guess. Like the fantasy there is like, yeah, maybe they're like noble or something like that.
Yeah.
And the more, and there's even different classes of food. So like humanoids. So sorry, the higher percentage, there's like a percentage disparity between your food, your like fed level, and then the fed level that someone will give you. And once they're low health, you can bite them. And if you bite them and you finish biting them, then you like suck their blood and you regain your health globe in the middle, which is good. But then also you get the bonus based on how good of a target they are. And the bonuses are tiered in 5 tiers. There's like rank 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I think, for most things. And like at rank 1, you'll get like a little bit of movement speed, for example, from animals. Animals have like savage blood, I guess, or something like that. And then at tier 2, you'll get like a little bit of damage bonus. Anyways, at the max tier, you actually have quite a bit. Like you're critting your attacks, you're doing all sorts of really cool stuff. And so you're constantly looking at your targets of like who has the best blood for me to sap. And if they don't have the best blood, then I probably don't want to waste my time sapping their blood until I can find someone else. But you also want to keep some blood in your reservoir. And so I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
Also, the thematics there were like if you're eating animals that are like wild, you are also becoming more wild. You're becoming faster. You're attacking more frantically. If you're attacking humans, then you're smarter. You're getting attacks of opportunity. You're getting critical strikes. And what that does is it kind of does the same thing that loot does in Diablo, where like you never know what to expect when you pull a set of monsters, and you don't get to know how good their blood is until they're low health as well. So you're really not only are you really paying attention to your surroundings and the environment because you're worried about daylight, and that feels really good because that's part of that thematic of being a vampire. You're also assessing like, am I hungry? Like, who do I need to eat? Are you even a good target? And you feel really cool when you're like, yeah, I sucked that blood, and it's like a noble person, and now I'm like super powerful. But also, you know that it's a finite resource, right? Because the blood pool that you got from that really awesome enemy, you can either like roll with that bonus for a really long time by never blood mending, or you can blood mend and then you'll lose the bonus faster, but you'll regain your health, which is one of the only ways to regain health. So like that whole system, I know I didn't really talk about the design of it. I just talked about like what it is. I think that's such an improvement. I think that's like one of the more key innovations to my enjoyment of the game for sure.
Yeah, because it's always a challenge with like crafting to make it feel like you have choices, right? Because it always is very easy. Just you use the high tier food, everything else is trash. But it sounds like here you're thinking about the world, what you're killing, and whatever. It's intentional, right?
It adds a context, so you never just disregard a patrol. Like you're always looking at it more deeply and evaluating it for secondary benefits, or in some cases primary benefits.
Yeah,
which is, it just brings you in. It engages you.
Yeah, what you said is really important because they don't reveal that information to you until they're low also. So it's not
They
like you
actually
can just
do, but
oh, my bad.
Yeah, you can mouse over them and see at their health bar at the top of the screen what their percentage is.
Oh man, I was hoping they were like blood loot boxes, and you don't fucking learn until they're low. Yeah,
that's what it felt like for me, which I liked that because then combat never felt wasted.
I shouldn't have told you.
You should have told me.
You can't go
how
back.
sometimes in WoW, like if you pulled a monster that wasn't for your quest or that didn't drop loot or something like that, you're like, that's a wasted monster. But like, no monsters. Like you wanted to savor every last drop. But then Kevin just sucked the joy out of the game for me.
Oh my god, the fucking blood imagery is just, you're killing it today.
I really am happy for this developer. Those was it Stunlock, I think.
It's another Swedish developer. I'm curious how much they knew about Valheim during its development. Because
I mean, I knew about. Yeah, and I knew about Stunlock. They released a game that was like kind of ahead of its time, which was Battle Right. It's essentially, I knew about it because I was a big fan of WoW Arena, and it's basically kind of like WoW Arena, or almost like a mix between WoW Arena versus like a MOBA, like Dota or League, in like an arena, like fast-paced sessions, and it had like a really, really hardcore fan base for that game. But the challenge with that game, I think, in post-mortem, it'd be interesting to talk with the studio to see what they thought. But I think the challenge with the game is it just didn't have like a meta game. It was just too sweaty of an experience. Like, which is kind of really the challenge with WoW Arena too. Is just that it's too sweaty at the top, and people churn out. They're like, oh god, this isn't for me. But yeah, so it's cool to see that they've. And so what interests me, because one of the critiques with Valheim was just that the combat system was just kind of rudimentary, right? It wasn't bad, but it wasn't like anything innovative or interesting. So it was kind of interesting what you guys thought about the combat system in this game, because the studio has a lot of pedigree. I thought the combat fundamentals in Battle Right were pretty good. So
the combat is passable. It is binary pass. It does good. There are some good things about it. It's a little bit clunky. It's not as refined, I would say, as like Diablo, even though it's in the style of Diablo. Certainly there could have been more like that is what I've also identified as an innovation space. If someone wanted to make like the AAA version of this game is have a combat system that really feels meaty and good to interact with, whether it's like Bayonetta witching hour combo buttons or something like more God of War actiony or something that elevates the genre, because I think that that it's very passable. It does a really good job. There are even really interesting choices you get to make based on the abilities that you slot. Like all of the gameplay is there, just the fidelity is just kind of
yeah. I agree with that.
Okay.
Like here's how I'd rank them. I actually think Lost Ark is worse than Diablo, which is worse than V-Rising. So I think it is actually better than Diablo. Maybe not in the feel like you're talking about, Candace, but in terms of like if you play V-Rising like you play Diablo, you're going to get punished.
Oh, so it's more tactical. It's more tactical.
There's a number of moments where it's like just left clicking to win is going to fail you.
Yeah,
I love that because that's my critique of Diablo.
You have to pace your attacks. You have to use them at the right time. You have to, know when to go in and when to, pull out. Right. So I do think it's better than Diablo. You're not just filling the screen with damage and waiting for everything to fall over, right? Like you are in Lost Ark and Diablo.
I completely agree. Actually,
totally. There's all these just little things like the whirlwind on the sword. It doesn't last long enough, and it doesn't quite hit the area that the visual makes you think it's going to hit, right? So there's just all these little things that, like you were saying with the fidelity, it's like, they're nearly there. But
when I talk about the fidelity of it, I think you're right. There's way more decision making in combat than you would in Diablo, and certainly like that you can get overwhelmed and die because of positioning, which you kind of can't really in Diablo, and you're not, and you don't have you don't have the crazy power gains, but just things like the way that your character is facing when it's attacking versus when it's moving. It's kind of like, it's also like a WASD click hybrid problem, because in Diablo you click to move, but in this game you WASD.
Yeah, and your facing is based on where your mouse is rather than where your camera is.
Yes, and that is really hard. So your camera's
looking one way and your mouse is below your character, so you're actually looking towards the camera. And that can screw up your targeting a lot. And then on top of that, you can rotate the camera. So there are a lot of like potentially complicated scenarios that players can get themselves into.
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of thought, Diablo is kind of about efficiency and about like min-maxing your efficiency in terms of routes or how quick you can do a run and all these things.
It's less about the combat than it is about just clear times. And
so would you say the kind of experience or the design intent in V-Rising is not that? It's more about tactics, or like what do you think
it's more about moment to moment. Also, the enemies have pretty interesting attacks. Like they do various things like the glowy shield, and if you hit the glowy shield, then you get stunned. So don't hit the glowy shield. Wait until he's done with that ability.
Yeah,
they do a lot of area denial. They'll shoot exploding arrows that burn the ground. They'll send out dogs to harass you. Knock you off your horse or out of your wolf form.
They also have hit reactions like modern action games. So if you can hit a monster before they hit you, then you can pull them out of it. And so you feel like you're chaining your attacks in a meaningful way, which Diablo also does not have meaningfully.
Cool. Got it. So it's all Souls-like a bit.
Not nearly as in depth, but
some of the fundamentals for sure. Yeah, interesting. That's cool. Yeah, no, I think it's always challenging for designers to make the world feel dangerous, just because at some point the player is just going to corral up mobs and AoE them down or overpower them in some way that makes it feel toyish. And so, how does like once you progress past an area, how does the old areas just feel like a joke, or?
Yeah, they get worse. And one last thing I'd mention about combat, which again plays into what Candace was talking about with the blood thing, is they do have that attrition system where if you're taking a lot of damage, then it knocks off like your maximum until you are safe, essentially. And then refilling it requires a fair amount of blood or resources. So, like, it's rare that you're going to die because of bad play, but the punishment comes from attrition and use of blood, which might be really relevant because you have that amazing blood that you want to keep for as long as possible. So
Yeah, or you're fighting monsters that don't have blood, and so you really feel that attrition. You're like, I can't refeed I bet I'm gonna have to like run away and find a deer to go eat. And that feels like thematically that feels shitty. Like it feels shitty from a gameplay perspective because you're like, I don't have that amazing blood that I had, but also you're like, I guess I gotta go in the forest and eat a rat or something.
Yeah.
And like you're supposed to feel shitty for doing that because it's not like that's not the vampire fantasy is like eating rats in the forest, you know?
I think that's like a joke in Interview with the Vampire or True Blood or something, where they're just like, "Oh fuck, I gotta eat this rat because what." So yeah, that's.
And so again, like the punishment for bad play is like it feels really good because it's not like binary, life or death. It's back to that efficiency and just like everything is like reinforcing a very strong incentive for you to play well. Because when you play well, all the other systems that are connected with combat also perform better.
Does that mean that does that spiral back down the other way though too? Like I feel like is there a mid game or an end game at the past a certain point in Valheim? If I had to be going out and like farming fucking deer for a base level material, I was kind of annoyed,
Right.
Like there should be a point where you sort of evolve past that. So what's that feel like in V? I don't know how far y'all have gotten, but do you eventually just kind of like grow out of having to do certain routine farming tasks? Is there any kind of like automation, or as you move up through materials or blood types, like do you ever hit a new kind of baseline that you can't backslide through, or does it always feel like you could be back down to Rat Town if you?
I would say I'm like 2/3 of the way through. I'm in a really bad place to judge, like because once you get to the last third, you seem to be asking about, is the first third still relevant?
Right.
So I can't answer yet, but
because during the honeymoon phase, the first third is a fucking blast, but eventually I feel like it can become tedious, right?
Oh, for sure. Especially when you're super overpowered and all the challenge is gone, and it's just
yeah.
Oh, but go, I guess. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to talk about what I thought the third major innovation could be, but if we're still on this, we should keep chatting.
No, I mean, that was just my question. What was the answer to having to go back and farm deer or pigs for leather scraps when you're like 30 hours into a map?
Yeah, I feel like you mostly move on to the next tier. You go to the next zone, you need second tier resources to build second tier, tech or equipment. And then, every once in a while, or if you didn't do things completely, you might have to go back and get a little bit from the old zone, but mostly you move up.
I think it's also a taste thing too, because personally, as a player, I don't mind killing the low level stuff throughout the entire game. I don't mind killing deer if that's always relevant. If anything, that kind of makes me happy that there's relevance in the older content. It's not completely, it's just annoying to go through or whatever. It feels connected to the whole experience, but I
feel like it's a rate too, if it's 50% of my gameplay versus like 5% of my gameplay.
Exactly.
I'm just like
the nice thing about Valheim was just that you could divvy up those as like roles with your people you're playing with. Yep. Like I didn't mind going out and chopping trees for the group, even in Endgame or whatever. But some people did. They just wanted to go kill the bosses or whatever. So.
I mean, trees is one thing because they were just sort of always there. I don't mean to be like splitting hairs here, but I'm not sure if I'm like articulating this well. I'm trying to identify a feeling that I would run into in Valheim when I was playing it with groups over extended sessions. This feeling is called getting bored. I don't know exactly what it was about Valheim. Perhaps it was actually just how large and intimidating it was and how it felt like I'm starting over from like base level tech with a new settlement every single time. I mean, I loved the adventure of it, but there was a point where it felt like the expansion began to become a bit tedious, like landing on a new shore and having to do the same sorts of structures kind of all over again. Maybe I just didn't get far enough, but I'm just like, I guess I'm trying to see if that feeling exists in this game, or sort of maybe like how they deal with it. Like past a certain point in Valheim, after landing on my 9th shore, I was just not excited to have to like figure out where the chimney should go again. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah,
you do have to do some basic things like walls, but even the walls have like tiers to them. And like you graduate from research desk, which gives you all of your tier 1 techs, to I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically a tier 2 research desk. And so when you move to the tier 2 area and build your tier 2 castle, you don't need to build a tier 1 research desk. You can just build a tier 2 research desk. So
Gotcha.
And
some of that is natural, but then some things are sort of evergreen. Like you always need a blood altar, and you always need to put a coffin down.
Yeah, and I've heard y'all talk a lot about the combat and the blood harvesting and all of the emergent gameplay around that and the theming and everything, but how is the actual base building? Is it notably different?
It's very different from Valheim. You're not building it one square at a time. You're not like deciding where the chimney goes. It's more prefabricated, so it's like here's a wall, and you can string some walls together, but then like it'll generate a roof whenever you string walls together. It's like streamlined in a way that I actually was kind of poo-pooing at it. I was like, oh, this isn't as cool as Valheim, but I realized that the friends that didn't enjoy the mini game of like learning the physics of building a home were just like, this is so much better. Oh my god, I can just make a house, and it immediately feels like a castle and like all that stuff.
On the other hand, it's not going to sustain the creatives that
it's
Valheim,
maybe
it's
less fun for the architects, right?
So no one's going to build the Millennium Falcon V-Rising, right?
Yeah, totally.
So I think to your point, Luca, the game's superpower is kind of how small it is. Valheim's enormous. The planet's enormous, and it's procedurally generated, and it takes literally hours to sail across.
Yeah.
And the V-Rising is just not nearly as big, and so you don't have to establish a new base so many times. And you felt like because you'd be so far away from your base in Valheim that like you'd have to make another base as like a little temporary base so that you could like store away some stuff and eventually take your boat to it. But V-Rising it's much smaller of a game, even though I feel like you could still put in a lot of hours. A lot of meaningful gameplay hours, whereas a lot of the hours that you spend in Valheim were just getting from point A to point B, which was still rather joyful, like the traversal in that game, and it became higher stakes the further away from your base you got. Like there are trade-offs, but I think that the superpower of V-Rising is kind of the smaller like map.
So is that kind of your third thing you're talking about in terms of the big
No,
things?
that was fourth though. So yeah,
Oh, okay.
Fourth would be the one like how not as far as innovations, but like a key innovation space that they haven't addressed yet, and only because it's a brand new game, is like how do you keep people engaged over time? Like Valheim still hasn't quite done that.
This is what I was going to ask. Yeah, go ahead.
They nodded to it in the beginning of the game. We're like, oh, the Mistlands are going to be a thing, and then kind of like how would you sustain that as someone wants to play this game for 5 years? Like what does that look like? And how can content be exciting without crippling the newcomer? And you could spend some minutes talking about that, but then also because I said newcomer, the third innovation space that I wanted to talk about was catching up. And in these games, you have the people like me who will just poop socket, right? Like I will play this game, I will farm for my friends, I will refine all of our crude materials into usable materials so
organize
they can use
all the
later.
boxes.
I'm going to organize the boxes.
Make the signs. Yep.
Don't forget
I'm going to
labels.
farm all the stone. I'm going to label everything. And then when you get to the game, you don't get that same attachment to the world that I had. You don't know every nook and cranny and where to go farm stone because I have it packaged for you really nicely in a little package. And I'm like, hey, let's go. And so your experience of the game, Dylan, if you're listening, I'm so sorry. Dylan, who played Valheim with me, his experience was he logs in and I say, all right, here's all the materials. You can craft yourself a shield. We can now have brass stuff. We're going to go do this mine. Let's go. And so he didn't get to like have that enjoyment and like that attachment and that immersion to the world. He just came in and said like, oh, they've upgraded the base. They've gotten to the new level of materials and they need my body basically to help them kill monsters.
The sidekick feeling. I'm the sidekick and you're the main character. Yeah.
I'm trying so hard to not do that to my partner in V-Rising now, to not make him feel like he's but again, if there was some system that would save me from myself, or at least there's one thing that they did that I actually want to applaud, and it's very small, but it's very meaningful. If I go and I get a bunch of research, so research will let you do things like build new armor or build new castle walls or build new things in the game, and you have to go find these recipes, or you have to like you can get pages and pages will make a recipe. Like a small thing that they did to nod to the catch up is if you are the new player, the person who's coming in, you still have to go to the research table and click on all the things that someone else has researched to learn those patterns, as opposed to Valheim when it's like, oh, you just walk in and you can just make the best gear. It's very small, but what it does do is it gives a nod to me, the farmer, because everyone has to acknowledge that I farmed all of that stuff and get all of the stuff. But then also it acts as like oh, here's all the new stuff that you should care about, and puts it in your face, as opposed to Valheim, which like knowing that you can make glass armor now doesn't matter because
it's a ceremonial reveal as well. Like like you're saying, that one click makes a lot of difference.
The one click is just the awareness and just kind of like the
makes
homage.
It bite-sized too.
Yeah. So I thought
What
that was really
What is
smart.
that? What is this new thing? What is that new thing? Yeah, it's one at a time.
Yeah, so that's a nice touch. So, but you mentioned kind of this. I mean, because I had that same experience, and I think that's one of the challenges of these games is just that you're gonna have someone who poop socks, you're gonna have someone who comes on late or like intermediately, and they don't have like a really as good of experience. So they don't really do very. I mean, that's great that they kind of like help you learn like all the different steps that someone went through when getting to a certain tier or something like that. But is there any other way that they try to address that or?
No, not even a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
They
Most
let you
games,
go full hog
I
on
thi-
enjoying the
yeah.
game.
I mean, I think it's really a challenging problem with this genre to do
Yeah.
that. I mean, the other too is I think the other challenge is in a persistent world like this is just you get the same issue in Conan XLs or in
Mhm.
Rust and stuff like that where you're offline and then your base is just being attacked and then you wake up and then you're like, oh shit, someone just destroyed our base. And then then there has to be server quotas because it's just like, oh well, everybody from this group is online, but our group isn't, and we can't get in. And there's like a multitude of little problems like that.
Do y'all
The
have
first
problems with that?
8-hour session.
I don't know. I take things like that happening is like, oh, we went out to dinner and like somebody playing in Malaysia totally destroyed our base as kind of like a convenient jumping off point. Like we either make a new session next time or we go, well, guess we're good. I mean, it's like a hardcore death in Diablo. Like I appreciate that forced pause to just be like, do I need to play more? Maybe not,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily find it frustrating, but
it seems like there's a lot of thoughts with this game, so maybe we could do like another show sometime to talk more about it.
I mean,
but
we always say
I think
that.
the game is in a early access. Is that right? So there's okay, cool. So how do you guys feel about the completion? Is because I think Valheim was a really great experience, even though it was an early access and they have a lot planned for it still. How do you feel like this game is? Do you think it's enough?
I think the longevity will come from the PvP, like Rust, like the resets and the just races for people that want to run it back,
Yeah.
And if they add additional maps, like Rust has a couple of different maps, they could do that with this game as well.
From early access, obviously, most games would probably be feeling like there are arms of development that I can see really extending as they keep refining them or adding whole new things onto them. Like, what do you think those are with this title? Is it it's not class based really at all, but what do you feel like, boy, I might play this for a month and get bored, but if they were to add more X or improve on Y, I would want to come back? Because like I never went back to Valheim, for example. They like launched in early access, and it was a very, very, very strong early showing. But it sort of like they didn't shoot themselves in the foot. I mean, all those guys could retire as soon as they finished the game. But it was like it was $20. It felt like everything was there, and then you felt like you were kind of done, and you didn't really need to check back in from an early access perspective. Just wondering about the long tail.
Yeah, so I think again it relates to PvP because everything in PvP is contextual. Like every time you run it back. Like, because the way the world is set up, it's like there's various resources in different spots. And I think they could actually do a better job of this. But like, if I build my castle next to a certain camp, then I have access to resources that the guy across the map who set his castle up next to a different camp doesn't have. Right. And so there's contextual differences on how we progress in terms of gear and tech and things like that based on the resources I have versus what they have. And so the next time I play, we might switch. I might have the other base or a third location or fourth location.
Is it random where you start?
It's not random because you can build wherever you want, but there's competition for all the spaces.
Yeah,
so sometimes guys are going to bully you out, and sometimes you're going to be the bully, right? So
Is that just kind of like a Warcraft 3 style thing of just like, the sense of I had 2 footmen here before he had 2 grunts here, and so I win the mine, that kind of a thing?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then you have to make do, right? Like some combination of whatever you're able to earn in the beginning and how you progress and all that. So I think the context could be wildly different each time you run it back. And then if they add additional maps, which when you first see a new map, everyone's got to figure out again, like you have to dissect the map and figure out what are the sweet spots, where are the best places to build your castle if you want to do this strategy or that strategy. So right now, I think it's too many of the resources are scattered sort of everywhere. So there's actually not enough deprivation in terms of progression. It doesn't make those choices as interesting. But I do think that's something they could explore in terms of longevity.
That's really interesting. My brain didn't go to PvP at all, but that's totally the right answer. My thinking is something similar to what you're saying at a very high level, but not exactly the same thing. What it sounds like is what I heard from you was that like the thing that keeps the game fresh is the players' relationships with each other. So sometimes you'll play the game and you'll be cock of the walk and you'll be the top person on the server, but sometimes you'll get overrun, and that's a very different experience. And so it changes the way that you see the world because you're relating to the players in it in a different way.
Yeah, and then the trick, of course, is it still fun when you're second best? And that's one of the evergreen problems is fun to lose.
And my solution was similar, but you change the way that players relate to each other or that players relate to the world. So I feel like a game like PoE does seasons, and every season you get to at least like experience the core gameplay loop over again, and it feels meaningful every time. And that's pretty much bread and butter for games nowadays. Like you get a season and there's like a reset or something like that. And certainly in survival games, you need those frequent resets to make the gameplay relevant. And then PoE will also like layer in new mechanics. So that kind of changes your relationship with the world, not very meaningfully because your gameplay loop is just like you're doing the same gameplay loop but with different gameplay, which feels fresh and it feels good.
Slightly different skill tree or
different outcomes from the decisions that you made. So really that's all it is. Like you get to make different decisions and you get to see different outcomes, and maybe you would see some new stuff that wasn't available to you before, or maybe in the best case you have a different outcome from the same decisions last season and that felt meaningful. Like, I chose to play this other class now because they're super powerful, and it's, or something like that.
Which as an experiment, a thought experiment, it's like, would PoE be better if their new content, like their new patches, were twice as long with twice the content, or would it be worse in terms of like long-term engagement?
Exactly. But I think the real secret sauce, and if anyone's going to pay me the big money, I guess, is to change the player's relationship with the world. And so a way to do that, meaning what I mean by that is like, you just adding new content is fun because it adds new choices, but changing the way that they look at the world entirely. So what if, in this league, here's a bad example, day and night cycle are reversed or something. Like you take damage when you're in the shadows or something like that. And that changes at a fundamental level how you interact with the world, because now you can't harvest because you're standing in shadows whenever you're harvesting. And or I don't know,
like Mythic Plus modifiers for this game-ish?
Mythic Plus modifiers also just feel like adding new content decision making. I mean, like changing your relationship with the world.
The rule set, okay.
The rule set,
In every PvP environment, you sort of get that for free because players are just so different. Like, this is one of the key reasons why League of Legends has lasted so long, because every game is
totally
5 different champions with 5 different people driving them on each side. So the combinations there are just so infinite that you have the potential for just unending variation.
The first 5 or 10 minutes of a Dota match, even a Warcraft 3 match, a League of Legends match, when anything is possible, I feel like I picked the right hero for the job and I haven't fucked anything up yet, are like the most exhilarating 10 minutes of gaming for me. It's like
and then you find out the guy you're supposed to
then
be
you're
good against
actually
is way better than you.
then you're tested the first time, you fall off a cliff basically, and you want to just like GG no re. But yeah, I love that early game feeling so much. I'm wondering, if it stays like repeatedly fresh in this game, or because every new kind of zeitgeisty title that comes out these days, or all of them, it's like there's a month where it feels like everybody and their mom should jump in, and then some sort of degenerate or irritating meta calcifies, and the real show-stopping good players start to get to the top, and then it feels like it's difficult to want to come in. Like, do either of you see like any risks happening with that here, in terms of something that, like, if left unchecked, could start to become problematic?
Absolutely. Just because, like, they don't, like Candace was saying, they don't have any sort of matchmaking or way of diversifying, like, who's playing.
So it's like stacking BattleNet lobbies with your friends, or smurfing, or okay.
There's
the blacklist from Dota or whatever, where it's like there's this thing that people are going to add to, and anytime they get pissed off at you, you're going to be like, you're not going to be able to play the game with other people. You guys remember that?
And so it's like playing with your board game group. You can only play one game for so long before, like, the strategies get kind of stale, and the outcomes start to feel kind of stale.
Well, that is unless Candace is putting her like world reversing rules into play.
Right.
That's
like usually you have to extract resources from the world, but what if during this season you don't need resources? It's all creative mode or something, and so that just changes the way you make every decision in the game, because now you don't need to gather resources or something. You don't have that emotional like sunken cost in your gear, and so that would feel fresh. It would also like kill the joy. So I'm not saying these are good ways to change the relationship with the world, but I think that's like the thought space.
Man, I feel like this is like a deposition where between the two of you, I'm like forcing you to like describe the game such that I can have experienced it without ever actually playing it. But like, what is the win condition of this game? Is it just everybody but you leaves the server? Is there an ultimate big bad to kill? How does it work?
There is an ultimate big bad, I've heard. There is just a giant list of bosses, much like Valheim, and I've gotten through like 2/3 of that list. But from a PvP sense, I don't know that there's, like, I don't know what the end game is. Because the thematic is become the next Dracula. So I don't know if that's actually a moment in the game where somebody elects you, you're the new Count Dracula.
Maybe when
you see.
The last boss gets felled or whatever, the game is done for everybody.
Maybe, yeah.
Sure. Okay.
And then that clan is the winner, and roll credits sort of thing.
Do you carry anything forward? Do you any kind of progression that they're sort of hinting at? Not necessarily a battle pass, but like, like I get to bring one extra silver sword with me in the next round or something like that. I don't know.
Well, silver hurts you, Lucas. So
I know it was a bad example. Like,
got my son's sword.
Does silver hurt vampires? That's a werewolf thing, man.
It does, actually.
Don't mash my tropes together. Okay.
It's kind of amazing because they have a thing where you can pick up silver, but it damages you for carrying it. And so if you like to loot in combat, what you can do, like, you're fighting a boss, you run past it to loot the chest, you hit take all, and then you realize it had silver in it. So you've got this giant stack of silver that's now damaging you over time while you're fighting a boss, and you have to like fumble with your inventory to get rid of it. It's actually has a really clever secondary effect of like punishing people for looting during combat. Anyway,
good. Nobody likes that guy. Don't be that guy that loots during combat. Man, I got to play this, but I probably won't until it's completely fallen out and we're talking about something else. But I do feel like I really got a good sense of what it's all about. I'm glad you two are having such a good time. It's rare to
it's quite good.
Become enamored with a game like this, especially hearing designers with minds like yours get so into it. It seems like they really cracked the nut with this one.
Yeah, they did well. They do. Cool. Yeah, needs more time in certain ways and some more evaluation, but their heart seems in the right place. And it's also just another great example of like people making games like Valheim that are just works of love. Like no monetization scheme in sight, $20, you know, like, and feels way higher value than that. So very interesting.
Yeah, gameplay first, as they say.
That's right.
Are either of you two streaming it?
I haven't streamed it. No,
you have not streamed it. Okay.
I've been on in games where it's been streamed.
Okay.
Now that I don't work at Blizzard, I might try streaming. It just feels
get a
so
cat
hard to
cam.
break into. Oh my god!
You don't have to break into anything. You know, you can just we'll get the announcements tweeted out to the Discord here, and you can have your tiny little community of Candacers that show up.
Yeah, I'd love to see it, but yeah, you should know that it will swallow up any and all of your time if you let it. So you'd have to be really disciplined.
Sorry, the game or streaming?
Streaming. Yeah.
Oh, streaming. Yeah. It seems kind of hard, so I don't think that's a risk for me. But I do understand what you're saying. Well, that's great. Okay, it seems like we should probably wrap her. If we end up talking about this again in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, it will be a sign of a really enduring title. So let's see how that goes. Yeah. But it was great hearing y'all thoughts on this. It didn't seem like we had any questions this round, but next week. Okay, thanks for sticking with us for another hour. Leave your questions and discussion topics in the channels. Hang out with us, and we'll see you next week. And since Chris isn't here, Candace?
Later, gamers.